Welcome back to Developmental Psychology. I'm your professor, Ryan Keith. In this video, I want to talk about one of the big ways in which we develop, or don't, as we go from early childhood through adolescence and eventually on into adulthood, tying into a big part of your brain that's really important for understanding the world around you, and that big deadline of 25 years old that we've talked about all semester long. So I'm going to jump up here really quickly and try to use a few of my slides to talk to you guys about some of this stuff. So right up here above me, you get to see some of my favorite slides from both early childhood and adolescence. One of the things that has been a real fixture in not just parenting magazines, but National Geographic, Time Magazine, and any of that stuff you see in the checkout at Publix or Winn-Dixie or whatever is a fascination with the teen brain. Why are teenagers just so darn confusing? When those of you who are currently teenagers don't find yourselves confusing at all. And really, the people who seem horribly confusing to most of you guys are the people who are confused about you, your parents. Why does there seem to be such a mismatch between who we are when we're teenagers, when we're in that stage of late adolescence, and who we are as adults? Why do we have such a hard time understanding people who really aren't all that different from who we were when we were that age? Why is it that we seem like we're exactly the same people we were then, but everyone else is totally crazy? In this video, I want to talk about some of these principles that we addressed initially in early childhood and how those things change and to some extent don't fully change as we move on through adulthood. So the principles that I really want to focus on talking about today are these two main features that made up for all of these mental shortcomings that you guys saw in early childhood. A misunderstanding of theory of mind, false beliefs about what we know and don't know, where the origin of knowledge comes from. How do you know what it is you know? Why is it that your imagination bleeds over into reality? All of this stuff, if you guys remember from a few weeks ago, could be centered down into a discussion of egocentrism and centration. Now, if you remember, egocentrism was all about who you were, right? That in early childhood, kids could seem like real jerks at 3-4 years of age because they literally did not understand that other people are people. That in the most basic sense, they believed that they were the only people in the world and that there was no real way for these little kids to understand that other people knew things differently or even had other experiences. If we were to take a number of us have talked about, kids that we have or that we know in preschool. If you take somebody in that preschool age range, 3, 4, 5 years of old, and give them some of the basic tasks that Piaget did, these children demonstrate a total inability to understand other people's perspectives or predict what it is these people would think, feel, or believe. An example of this is the Three Mountains task, where Piaget created a diorama, had kids report what they saw on their side of the Three Mountains, and then these children demonstrated an inability to understand that someone else might see something different. Kids do lots of other things to demonstrate that they don't understand that other people see things differently. They believe, for example, that if they know something, everyone else will know it too. If you know it, it's known. That's really what egocentrism is. It's not just being selfish, it's a total misunderstanding that other people are people. This leads you to not only be selfish and imagine that your viewpoints are better than everyone else's, they're simply the only viewpoints to have. Understandably, this would tie in a lot with our understanding of morality and what's right and what's wrong. What I want is what's right, and what I think is right, obviously, is what's right. The second feature that creates a lot of these cognitive limitations is centration. We talked for a while about how kids in that preschool age have an inability to understand cause and effect, and it's caused by centration. Centration means you can only really focus on one feature of a thing at a time. Its height, its width, how round it is, how flat it is, what its color is, what it looks like now versus what it looked like before. That limitation of centration, what is center in your mind and your attention, means that kids can understand that a glass of water is tasty and that a mess on the floor is bad, but they don't understand that that mess on the floor is the same glass of water that was there before, right? They can look at how many pennies are in a row, or they can look at how long that row is, but they don't understand that by stretching it out, you don't change the number of pennies in it. You can fool a 3-year-old into thinking you're doubling the amount of graham cracker they have by breaking a single graham cracker in two, because they don't understand that it's literally the same graham cracker and that the two halves are smaller pieces than one big piece together. So, why are we talking about this as we talk about adolescence? Well, it's because two of the big things that many parents find so confounding can be isolated right back to egocentrism and centration. When we look at some of the symptoms of the teen brain, we see that there are two main features that come out of egocentrism and centration: the imaginary audience and the personal fable. The imaginary audience, in short, means that teenagers think that people are paying them way more attention than they really are. Most of us are already familiar with the idea of the spotlight effect. We imagine people are watching us more than they are, that when we mess up in front of a crowd of people, it's the most upsetting thing in the world because everybody was watching you and judging you. That when you go to the gym to work out, that everybody is judging you for not already being in shape. When in fact, if you think about what you do in the gym or what you do during someone else's talk, nobody's paying attention to you. Well, during adolescence, during the teenage years in particular, this sense is magnified. We spend an inordinate amount of time on our hair, on our makeup, on our cool clothes, on making sure that our clothes and our backpack and everything is exactly right, that we like the right shows and we say the right things and that we never mess anything up because everybody judges us for who we are. That which group you belong to is really important. Who you do and don't talk to, who you are and aren't willing to ask out is really important because everyone's judging you all the time. Except here's the thing. Nobody does. Even more so than when you're an adult, nobody really cares when you're an adolescent because everybody is kind of between being a child and an adult. They're a little more egocentric than adults are, meaning that they're even more selfish than adults are, even more self-centered than adults are, meaning that they're focusing on themselves rather than you. That imaginary audience um, is also tied to and helps explain why a lot of adolescents may seem more selfish. They feel like what it is they're going through is really important. What college are they going to go to? What job? What career choice is the biggest career choice? Who it is they talked to most recently? What breakup they went through? What show they like? All of this feels really tremendously important because who they are and that sense of identity feels important because they, at their core, feel like the most important people. Right? It's hard to feel like everybody else is as important when you feel like the most important person yourself. An additional feature of adolescence, especially here in these teenage years, is the personal fable. The personal fable is that feeling of invincibility that a lot of parents and older adults may complain about, that teenagers seem to think they're invincible. Except here's the thing. Teenagers don't really think they're invincible. Think of how you feel now or how you felt when you were a teenager. You didn't really feel like you were invincible. You just didn't think about the consequences of your actions. Because even in the teenage years, you're experiencing a really mild form of centration. It's really hard to understand that something you haven't been through could possibly happen. And that's centration. It feels like if something hasn't happened to you yet, it's not really possible. After all, terrible car accidents that mangle people and cripple them for life or kill them and other people, that doesn't happen to you. That happens to people, right? A lot of us feel like this whole coronavirus thing is ridiculous, that you should be allowed to go to group gatherings and go to clubs. Like, absolutely cancel school and work, but please do also pay me for work, and don't cancel like the concert I'm going to go to or tell me not to go to my club, because ultimately I'm not going to get coronavirus. People are going to get coronavirus, right? I don't get hooked on drugs. People get hooked on drugs. When I was a kid, one of my favorite things in the world to do was skateboard. I used my skateboard to go everywhere. And not just that, but like go bomb at the skate park, right? Like you'd go hit the half pipe and the quarter pipe and do all sorts of dumbass tricks and do these things without a helmet or pads because, I mean, like helmets and pads are stupid. Like they're hot and they hurt and they don't really, like they're uncomfortable and they don't really do anything, right? Because I've never broken a bone. I've never had a traumatic brain injury. And as a result, it feels like that's something that is nearly impossible to experience. So the other reason why I have this like picture of a brain up here, right, is because it all really does come down to the part of the brain that's developing. If you guys remember from our previous discussions, the last part of the brain to develop is your prefrontal cortex up here. That prefrontal cortex that's involved in executive function and helping you understand the consequences of your actions. It helps you understand the consequences of your actions, other people's perspectives, a world that does not yet exist. As a result, before the age of 25, your prefrontal cortex really doesn't seem to be all that well developed. As we move on to our discussions next week about emerging adulthood and early adulthood, we'll talk a little bit about like Do teenagers not understand the world because their prefrontal cortices are not well developed, and as a result, should we create safeguards for them? Or is it possible that they don't understand the world because they're not forced to understand the consequences of their behavior, and as a result, should we have them exercise that prefrontal cortex with an understanding of difficult consequences for their actions? Right. In the meantime, though, I know you guys are focused on finding fiction that ties in with, identifying toys that are entertaining for people in early and middle childhood. But I also want you to be looking ahead at your next reflection exercise that's going to have you look at fiction that appeals to you in adolescence and early adulthood, the things that people are going through, and why it is this fiction would appeal to you in the first place. When I think about young adult fiction, this is what really made me think about coming up with this assignment. Every single piece of young adult fiction is the same. And that's one of the things that I love about it. Think about your favorite piece of young adult fiction. Maybe it was Harry Potter that you first fell in love with. Maybe it's Percy Jackson. Maybe it's we've been binging on Netflix The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, which, man, I tell you guys, it's a lot of fun and it's cool, but it is some of the most young adult fiction I've ever seen. Every person who takes action as a teenager, most of the adults are idiots, and they're constantly struggling with issues of social groups and breakups and who am I as a person really, even though all that stuff doesn't matter because the world's in danger, right? But when we look at this and why it appeals to people, why is it that all young adult fiction seems to follow this arc of I'm not special at all. I should be special, but I'm not. I'm in the society surrounded by people who are special, and I'm not. In fact, I'm homely and I'm awkward and nobody likes me and I can't talk to anyone. And then it turns out, not only am I a special kind of person, but I'm the specialist kind of special person. I'm even more special than all of the other special people are. And as I go through these trials and tribulations and make it through it because I have some special thing about me, my body goes through these transformations that gives me new powers. My body goes through all of these confusing processes that all of a sudden I'm able to do things I couldn't before. And then, of course, not only do I end up with a possible relationship with somebody who's way out of my league and I'm not awkward anymore, but in fact, I attract more than one person and have to muddle my way through the competing attractions of multiple really attractive people, right? In the end, I save the world because I'm the best person and everybody loves me and nobody talks about anything except me. I'm the most important person and I'm invincible and I survive forever. It's probably easy to think about how a piece of fiction like this might appeal to somebody who suffers from the personal fable as well as the spotlight effect, or specifically the imaginary audience. And that's really exactly what it is I want you guys to be thinking about. So in this sense, I'm not just picking on teenagers to pick on teenagers. What I really want to do is highlight this idea that we never really step out of some of these cognitive limitations. Even after you're 25, even after you're adult, is it sometimes harder to understand people's perspectives? Sure, especially people who are different from you. Definitely. Is it sometimes hard to understand the consequences of your actions, especially if those consequences are way, way off, or they seem really vague? Absolutely. This is why we have people hoarding toilet paper and in hurricane season, people hoarding gas instead of buying it well in advance the way they should. If you have questions about the egocentrism, centration, and how they're tied to the personal fable and the imaginary audience, the assignments, anything else, remember you can talk to me during my office hours. During my normally scheduled office hours, you can talk to me by going to officehours.page.link/meet or calling me at 395-5544. Of course, you can always feel free to email me anytime and we can set up another time to talk. Hope everything's going well. You're staying safe, you're staying comfortable, and taking care of the people around you. I'm your professor, Ryan Keith, and I can't wait to talk to you guys more about adolescence, early adulthood, and how it is we become the people we are today.